Hi, Nadia. Welcome to the Cosmic Artist podcast. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to have you here. And I'm thinking about how I've wanted to actually have you on here for a while. I didn't message you when I got the urge, but I was like, the time will come. And the time that I actually wanted to have you on was when I saw you painting your space and your walls and your like towards your ceiling. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I want to do that in my space someday. So we'll
Mhm.
get to that, but let's start with you introducing yourself and sharing with us some of your favorite things in the world.
Okay, I'm Nadja. I am 35 and I live in Sarasota, Florida, which is on the west coast of Florida. So the one that gets the sunsets and the dolphins and the Gulf of Mexico. And my favorite things in the world are, oh, I love painting. I really love painting. It is the relationship with my inner child that is my favorite thing in the world. It's my home. Other things that are my favorite things in the world are visual pleasures like gorgeous skies and gorgeous flowers and textures that I love. And so just sensual things. I love the senses. I love hanging out with my partner, Nick. I love hanging out with my niece and my nephew. So connections and relationships, I love. Yeah, those are my favorite things. And I love really good food also.
Ooh, yes. Do you know your sun, moon, and rising? Because this all sounds
I do.
very Taurus.
I'm not Taurus. I am a Leo sun. So do you want to do Vedic or do you want to do Western astrology?
You
Because
can
I
share both.
okay. So in Western, I'm a Leo sun and a Libra moon and Pisces rising.
Mm, gotcha.
In
Okay. Vedic.
Vedic, I'm a Cancer sun, Aquarius rising, and
Virgo moon.
a Virgo moon. Yes.
Okay, I got you. That's so fun. I have a Leo sun and a Libra rising. So we have that
Oh,
commonality.
and we've got that round facial shape of the Libra.
Yeah,
And
I also
green.
and the main, yep, Leos.
Yeah.
You can spot a Leo from across the room,
Yeah.
especially with your answer, with you saying that your relationship with your inner child is your favorite thing. I think that is so precious. So I'm curious to know, how did you get into painting? What got you started painting? Have you been painting your whole life?
I have been painting my whole life and I never like thought that I was going to be an artist for the rest of my life. I didn't really have I didn't know what I was going to be or do until I was in college and I asked my mom like I was already a sophomore and I said like what should I declare as my major and she's like what about art? And I was like, "Whoa, what? Really?" And so I did it and I've just absolutely never looked back. But now that I look back, all the signs were there,
Yeah.
like they were all there. I've been painting for my whole life.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. And those elephants behind you are elephants that you painted, right?
Yeah, everything in my house. So I've been turning my house into an art gallery.
Yeah.
I had my first exhibit on 11/11, and that was really exciting in my new house, in my new gallery. And this has been my dream for quite a while to have a living art museum because artists like Frida Kahlo, she's got a museum, but she's not alive to be there for it. She would have loved to be alive for it. So I'm like, I'm alive, like let's go. Like,
Yeah.
what are we waiting for till I'm dead? Like that's ridiculous. So it's a living art museum. It's always changing and as you saw there's a mural happening. There's just a constant, like basically my house just tells me what she wants and I just listen.
Hmm. Which I feel like is such an important thing when you're an artist, right? I think it's a lot more about listening than it is
Yes.
about anything else. Because I
Yes.
think when we put the pressure on ourselves to create and we feel like it's just
Yeah.
coming from us, don't you feel like that's when resistance begins?
100%. I could not agree with you more. I literally could not agree with you more. Yeah.
So, okay, so what was your catalyst to begin painting your house or begin your living art gallery?
My divorce.
Okay, let's talk more about that. So tell us about your divorce.
Okay, so I was married for 6 years. We met in Israel, and I was living in Israel. We came back to Sarasota, which is where my family lives. And around February of 2022, well, first we bought the house in 2020, like right around COVID, beginning of COVID. And then 2022, I started realizing that something's very off. I started mourning the relationship at that point, and then I went on a solo trip to California, which really, really changed me. I had never been on a solo trip. I had never been, I mean, I went to Israel by myself, but like I never felt like I was on a solo trip per se. So that trip changed me. It was 3 months where I rented a Prius and I went up the coast of California, and I was completely on my own schedule, my own plans, my own listening. I could listen to where I was guided rather than like being with someone else and like kind of listening to what we're guided. It was like me, myself, and I. And I had this experience of like, I've got me. Like, I've got me. That was kind of a mantra of that trip. And at the end of my trip, I was at Mount Shasta, and it just became like quite clear that it was going to end up in a divorce rather than us making it work. And I I mourned it. It was a whole on death, full on death. We fought over the house for 2 years because this year I finally bought him out of the house. And um so there was this scene. Have you ever heard Chelsea Diane talk about like that would make a great scene in a movie? So there was this scene in my movie that was really great where I was on the witness stand in the courtroom, and my ex-husband's lawyer said to me, like, isn't it true that your mom's helping you pay for your lawyer fees? And I was like, no, I'm paying for my lawyer fees. And he was like, but how? You're an artist. Like, it just like fell out of his mouth. And I've been realizing that I'm here to be a guide for other artists. I've been realizing that for a while, but like there's certain points like that one that I'm like, I cannot stand for artists having this scarcity complex anymore. Like this has got to go. So part of this art museum is creating dignity, like spaces that are dignified for art. Like art is not just something that like throw in a like coffee shop and like put 25 bucks on it. It's like it's dignified. And so this museum has just been um an unfolding, but it's almost like it always was going to happen. Like I've collected my own art because I've created a very high value for my art for a long time. Um and because I haven't been like famous or whatever, I haven't been like selling it at that value. So I've been collecting my own art and keeping that value and not just being like, all right, fine, you can have it for $200, but like really just like keeping it. So it's almost like this was always going to happen. And here we are. That's that's like the medium answer. There's also like so much more, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that you went on your solo trip, and I love how you said that you were able to listen to just you. Like you
Yeah.
made the channel so clear that
Yeah.
there was really no other option, especially being in such a sacred place. And I also
Yeah.
love how you're saying you're keeping the value there. So, how has it transformed since you started it? Because I know that there was a flood, and I saw your
Yeah.
messages on the Poems and Power group chat where you were saying that you weren't sure if your art pieces were going to make it.
Yeah.
Um, so how did that go? How did that feel? And did that make you then decide to open your gallery quicker?
Yes. Yes. So I had a huge art exhibit in Jerusalem 10 years ago. It was 2014. And it was a really big, prestigious. I've always had this like, it needs to be prestigious, it has to be dignified. Like for me, it's like that's a no-brainer. Um, and then I went 10 years of being married and just cultivating my inner artist voice and training my skills, et cetera, and also a lot of shame. And I just didn't show my art for 10 years. So then I've got my gallery and it's just like, it's not ready yet. It's not ready yet. It's not ready yet. And then Hurricane Milton comes through. And I live on the beach that Hurricane Milton like touched down on. It like landed on the beach that like I live about 3 minutes from that beach. And it was really wild to experience what it feels like for all of my art to be, because I was in New Jersey, so I wasn't here. I couldn't really, like my boyfriend, he got all of my art, he got some of my art like on WhatsApp, FaceTime or whatever. I chose like 40 of my favorite paintings and he took it to a storage place. And then I kind of just like was like, I don't know what's gonna happen to the rest of it. And it's all of my art since kindergarten, because I said I've been painting since kindergarten. I have all of my art. And I'm like in New Jersey and I'm basically just like, okay, so this is what it feels like to potentially lose your entire life work. And it was this powerful reclamation similar to my solo trip of like, I've got me, you know? Like even everything I've poured out for all these years into all these paintings, all this value and all these memories and all this like it's almost like in Harry Potter with like Horcruxes, you know, when Voldemort puts himself into like Horcruxes. It's almost like all these Horcruxes that are so filled with my soul because I leave it all in every single painting. And to make peace with the fact that my paintings potentially are going to be completely flooded by this category 6 hurricane. Like it's like a higher hurricane than like they were just making it really sensationalized. Anyway, long story short, my home was dry. It was not touched, but right before Hurricane Milton like touched down, I was like, okay, if my art makes it, if my house makes it, I'm going to open my gallery, even if it's not ready yet, and all the shame and all that. And I chose the date of 11/11, and I really pushed it. It was like a birth, like to get that looking and feeling right by the time people came in my house. Even when people came in, I was still like making the lighting right and like making the food. And but I did it, and I feel that I've entered into a new threshold now that I've done that. Like I really needed to get past that threshold to look around and be like, I'm actually living my dream right now. And I was holding off on it. I was just like, it's not ready yet. But like all along, I've been living it. I've been a full-time artist living in my museum home, you know? But I hadn't showed myself that yet. And so that portal was really important for me.
Hmm. I love that. Okay, I feel like so many of us, so much of the time, feel like we want to do something, but we're just not ready. Like we just feel
Yeah.
like we don't have the strength, we don't have uh the courage. Like it's just a lot of things that we feel like we're
Yep.
not ready.
Yep.
But I feel like three key words that you said can get us through anything, which is I've got me. And so
Yeah.
what would you say, or like, yeah, what would you say to someone that feels like they're not ready and that feels like they don't got themselves? How do you feel like we can start to have our own back more so that we
Mhm.
get more courageous about who we are, so that we are more comfortable sharing our authenticity, whatever that means?
I don't know if this is within everyone's, field of possibility, but I do believe that it is. But going on a solo trip is, I just would recommend that, like, just feel yourself when you are alone, when you're kind of cut free from all the ties that we don't even pay attention to. Like, I'm someone to this person, I'm someone to that person, I'm someone to that person. But meanwhile, so I like to describe it like this, like I've got a cup of tea here, and this tea bag is steeping in its own water. It's not like water that's got a bunch of different tea bags. It's like one tea bag, one cup. And I just felt myself steep in my own water. And I felt myself not in any like malicious way, but like cut ties with everything. Not in like I hate the world, but just like I want to feel myself. I want to feel my own truth, my own being. And that is something I would recommend to myself when I need that and to anybody to start and it's not like it was like comfortable the whole time. There's parts of myself I got to face that was like, I really don't like this about me, but it's like no one's coming to save you, you know? Like you might have I've got a lot of supportive people in my life, but no one is coming to save me. I get to meet me, greet me, love me, got me, like I've got your back. So that's where I would start for sure.
I love that analogy of the tea bag. I think that just makes so much sense. And it's like you get to just expand. And what I'm thinking of as you're talking about this is for so long, the conversation has been about cord cutting rituals and rituals to do things. And I feel like when we feel like we don't want to do rituals, the easiest thing is to look at our physical body and see what we can change with that.
Yeah.
Which is like what you said, like literally just take yourself out of the situation. We're not escaping it. We're not running away from it. We're just giving
Yeah.
ourselves a little bit of space to kind of
Yeah.
understand what's going on. Because when we get ourselves out of a situation, I think it allows us to see it in such a different way, right?
I mean, I'm really thinking about the movie Frozen right now, you know? Like she hides away for so long with fear that her superpower is going to harm someone. And then she finally runs into the hills and like the tundra, and she finally has space. And she's like, it's funny how some distance makes everything feel small. I felt like that. I have space. Like I was like yelling and praying into the ocean in California and like feeling the powerful ocean. And I was just like one with force and one with space. And it was so empowering. So yeah, watch Frozen. If you want to start somewhere, watch Frozen.
I love that. I mean, a lot of Disney movies recently, also
Yeah,
Moana, just like get
yeah.
on a boat, like get further away and kind of see how much I think also when we take ourselves out of a situation where we kind of feel like we're being choked or we don't belong, we see how much more similar we are to more people in the world rather than
Mhm.
like forcing ourselves to be in a place that we feel so different.
Yeah.
Okay, so I also want to talk about something else that you said, which is how the lawyer said, how could you be paying for it if you're an artist? And how
Mhm.
you talked about being an artist not being synonymous with scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
And I think it's still pretty loud, it's still pretty
Yeah.
loud of don't be an artist if you want to make money.
Yeah.
But I mean, to me, everyone is a artist, so everyone is an artist to some degree, whether we want to admit it or not.
Mhm.
So, how do you feel like we can change this narrative?
Well, I hosted a summit when I got back from that. I hosted a summit a year ago and it was called You Are an Artist because I hold that everyone is an artist. They don't necessarily know that or feel comfortable with that, but they also don't know the way that I define artist is aligning radically with truth. So ART, aligning radically with truth, with the truth of who you are. Anyone who is doing that, I feel that they are an artist. You asked me what was the exact question?
How can we change the narrative of an artist being synonymous with scarcity? Rather, like, how can we make it more about artists being abundant, like so incredibly abundant in every way possible, because I think that's the truth. Like when we're talking about people that are so deeply connected to our radical authenticity, like
Yeah.
how is that connected to scarcity mindset? I think that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. So let's just first say that we're born into, I call it the drift. We're born into the drift. We die in the drift. I'm not going to be dying in the drift, and I'm not going to be leading anyone into the drift. I'm leading them out of the drift. But the drift is basically like this contaminated water that is for many centuries that whatever you do and whatever your results are and whatever you like accumulate, that's what your value is. So I created a workshop called Value Your Value, Value Your Value, because the premise is we are all sitting on a gold mine of value, and I'll go into that in a second, and we don't know how to mine it. So it's like we're all sitting on a gold mine of value, and we're like, I don't know how to mine this because no one teaches us how to mine our unique value. They only teach us how to make money, being a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, like that kind of thing. Um, we don't know how to mine our unique gifts. And you've probably heard the word ikigai. Ikigai is a Japanese term. It's like our unique purpose that we can get paid for, yes, that we're really great at, that we really love, that people need. Like it's kind of this sweet spot of finding our unique gifts and offering. When we find our place in the mycelium network, like think about all of us as mycelium kind of filaments, like transferring inspiration. So now you and I are transferring inspiration to one another, and then it's going to go out to the other mycelium. When you find your place in the mycelium network, you've got access to infinite abundance because everyone needs that piece of inspiration that you are so grounded in. So I call that standing in the drift. Like you're not like asleep to, you're not sleeping on your value. You're standing, even though the world is very loud, like you said, it's very loud. Like the lawyer on public record telling me like there's no possible way that I'm paying my lawyer fees. Um, but he was really just saying what my fear was, you know, he was speaking out what my own fear was at that in that moment. And I've really faced I this year was a year of facing scarcity like I've never faced it before in order to find abundance like I've never found before. Um, so this is the topic that I'm most excited by right now. I again like don't know exactly what your question was because I'm so excited by this topic that I just don't know where to go. I'm so excited by it.
Um, okay, so how do you think we can get artists to value themselves more? I love what you said about us sitting on a gold mine without even knowing it. So, how do you think we can start becoming aware of the gold mine that we're sitting on? How can we
Mhm.
start becoming, um, how can we start listening more? How
Yeah,
can we start becoming more aware of the value that really
yeah.
exists within us just because we're human? Because, yes, perhaps we are born in this drift, but once we step out of the drift, once we become aware, there really is so much there. And then when we
Mm,
see what's there, we get scared. And then
mm,
we end up kind of going in a scarcity mindset. So,
yeah.
and then it just ends up being a cycle, I think. So, the first step, I think, is how can we become so radically aware of the value that we bring just by being human?
Oh, this is like I'm literally planning a workshop around this right now. So it's crazy timing that you're asking me this right now as like right before I got on this call. I'm planning this workshop. So um all right. So let me ask everyone who's listening and you, can you feel your inner child right now? Like can you feel her? Can you see her? Can you feel like what are some adjectives about her? Like even I'm just asking you right now, Karina, like what are some adjectives of your little child, your inner child who's just So tapped
Um,
in.
I would say whimsical, playful, and curious.
Yeah. And imagine her walking to a fountain of creativity. It's like it's just this infinite creative fountain. Like she'll never ever get bored. There's so much there. Like when she connects with this fountain of youth, let's call it, and she's brings that and she's in touch with that everywhere she goes, that is the source of abundance. She will never run out of inspiration. And when she knows how to um, outlet that, because I think in our world we have a lot of input and we're very inspired, but we don't necessarily know how to output. So I'm really passionate about freeing an artist's skill set and not making it too dogmatic that they have to like stay to skills, but like giving them enough skills so that they can start articulating their heart, articulating, um, that they can start actually being in that. It's almost like a lightning bolt. Like I can see them like standing in a field with like lightning just coursing through. Like I can get into that field really easily now. Where it's just like I'm like tapped in, turned on, or whatever Abraham Hicks calls it. Like it's in the flow. It's this sweet spot that for some artists, like maybe that feels very elusive. Like, where is the sweet spot? Like maybe they're very in their head. But when you can get into your body, you can give permission to your inner child to be curious and be herself and give her, it's kind of like a counterintuitive because you kind of need to give her abundance in order to tap into abundance. She needs to feel creatively free in order to feel creatively free. Um, there's a saying that I like to say, which is either we're surviving or we're creating. So I really needed to train myself that it was safe to paint during the hours of 9 to 5 because my nervous system was so challenged by I need to make money during 9 to 5, and painting felt very unsafe. And I had to train my nervous system that it was safe day after day to make art. I was already known as like a professional full-time artist. Like people knew me that way, and yet I was like living this secret that I was actually terrified between the hours of 9 to 5 to like paint. And what I'm now uncovering and I'm kind of pioneering, but I'm not the only pioneer. There's a lot of artists that are pioneering this, is like that it's not only safe to paint during those hours, but that's where our abundance lies, is tapping into that creative field that is infinitely connected to source. It's a prayer, it's a permanent on switch. It's a maple syrup tree. Like there's so many analogies to describe this. Like when you tap that maple syrup tree, you're never gonna wonder like, where is maple syrup gonna come from? It's just gonna come. It's just gonna keep coming. So kind of having like the buckets to collect it is more the question. It's not like where is the abundance? We know where it is. We just kind of need to collect it and know how to somewhat like harvest it and know how to stand in the value of it so that when you invite people to your home or to your dignified space that you're sharing it, you can stand in the value of it rather than, okay, you can just have it for $5 or something like that. Like you can stand in the actual value of it. It's a long conversation, but that's kind of like the wave tops that I would say to that.
Wave tops. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, what you were talking about just now made me think about how interesting it is that as an artist or even as humans, the underlying emotion plays such a big part. Like how you were saying you didn't want to paint from 9 to 5 because there was that shame of, I don't know, maybe this is not what I should be doing at this time because I should be making money. And that's just making me realize like thoughts are such things, like thoughts are such tangible things, actually. And we need to become more aware of the underlying thoughts that we're having because if the underlying thought is, I don't feel worthy of painting from 9 to 5, but then we are painting from 9 to 5, but we're still operating from that same mindset, I feel like then the art that we create, we also don't give as much value to it because we're creating from the mindset of, I'm not supposed to be creating at this time. Versus if we're like, oh my God, I can create at any time of any day, then the art that we create also kind of just speaks that. We don't even have to explain the art at all because it's like art that pops. It's art that's happy rather than art that's created from the place of, I shouldn't be doing this right now.
Absolutely true. I can tell when an artist is free, and I can tell when an artist is struggling internally with that debate. You can't hide in art. So that's another part of this is the alchemy that happens on an artist's journey. I'm just speaking to anyone who's maybe starting out or really doesn't like their art right now. It's a very normal part of the process. So I just want to speak to that because as we are doing those early phases of like mileage, right? It's kind of like it's putting in the 10,000 hours or whatever that phrase is. When I remember it was a long time of me feeling like I'm just putting in my time and I don't like what's necessarily coming out. I do feel like we can shorten that with the right teacher. I just want to say that. Um, but it is a very real thing that if I'm not connected to joy, source, prayer, spirit, love, expansion, like if the intentions aren't right, if I'm not feeling free, then definitely my art is going to be representing kind of a slog of like, I know it will be good, but right now it's not. I was just talking to someone earlier today and she's like, I feel so rusty that like I do not like what comes out at all right now. And I personally get really excited when someone shares that because now I know where they are and now I know where to guide, like how to guide them. So I don't feel that that's a challenge, but I wish that I had a guide when I was going through those early stages of like, man, I don't know where to go. I do not have the skills and I do not know how to tap into abundant joy because right now it just feels like it's all caving in around me. So both of those are true. And I would say get a really good guide who's connected to source because you can navigate out of that space really quickly, in fact.
Let me ask you a question. What would you say is the difference between getting a guide versus trying to teach yourself based on YouTube videos or Instagram videos or whatever else we can see out there?
If you find someone on YouTube that feels like a great guide, that's a guide, you know? There's someone. Um yeah. Uh if people can find someone that they love, it's kind of like when the student is ready, then the teacher appears.
Yeah.
So I would say before just searching for like any old thing on YouTube, get your energy right so that you can start to attract teachers that are connected to their heart and connected to abundance and source. Um, Once you tap into those kind of teachers, then it's just game on. Like then you just like it's almost like in Finding Nemo when you get into like the flow, you know, like into the it's like I don't remember what they call it. It's like the highway, you know, like just get into the. Did you see Finding Nemo? Yeah, when it's like get into the. I don't remember what they call it.
I can't remember either, but I totally know what you're talking about. I can
Yeah,
see the visual.
yeah. So you can get into the fast lane really quickly when you meet the right teacher. I would like to give a quick representation of when you don't have the right teacher. I had two teachers that were not the right teacher. The first one was in college, and she told me that my paintings are saccharine, like aka like too sweet. Like my colors were like I wasn't using color right. Like I loved color, but I couldn't really like use it right. And it was kind of like too saccharine and sweet and like it just didn't feel good to look at it, but I didn't know how to correct it and she didn't know how to teach me. And then she told me that only like my grandma would ever like my paintings. It was just very shaming. And that kind of thing really sticks with artists. So I would like to say to you guys at home listening, if you have anything that anyone has ever said to you, write it down on a piece of paper and you can have like a ceremony of like that was that person's projection at that time, and it does not have anything to do with who you are or what you're capable of. It was just a snapshot at that moment that that person was projecting onto, and it is not part of your intrinsic character at all. And just have some kind of like shame ceremony with that and like burn it or something. Like they didn't mean harm, they were just triggered in that moment and it does not have to do with you and hurt people, just like let go of that. Because that is not a good thing to carry when we're doing art. Like that inner critic is already so there present that having any extra like weaponry is really not servicing us when we're at our canvas having this pure inner artist, exploration. So that's what I would like to say about that. And then I had another teacher and he taught me skills. He taught me skills and I'm grateful to him. And I don't want to say that I am not. And he's very dogmatic about art. And he had things to say about artists like Van Gogh. Like he thought Van Gogh is not a good painter. And I was like, that's my favorite painter. So I got to have like a 2-year recovery period after that teacher of just recovering from his dogmatic beliefs about art because I got to find what my beliefs are about art. So while his technical skill trained me very well, I'm very grateful for it. I picked up a lot of dogma that I like spent at least 2 years recovering from. So that's another thing is you might be doing art with other people's dogma that's running your inner critic, and like clearing that out of your system is very, very important so that you can feel what your innocence feels like when she's on or he is burdened and uncontaminated.
That's so interesting because I'm thinking about the difference of someone that creates art having studied art versus someone that creates art having not studied art. AKA actually in this conversation, me and you.
Yeah.
And you studied art and you have all of this technique and you have all of this um yeah, you've been taught, right, how to create
Yeah.
art. And then there is me who I've been taught how to create art in art class, which also
Mhm.
was very judgmental, right? Teachers always had the best student in art class and everyone else just sucked at art, which is really hard. Like that's a tough pill to swallow because actually, we are all artists from the second we start coloring our first paper, actually from the second we utter our first words, because words are art as well. Um,
Mhm.
but throughout our whole journey of life, we're taught you're not creative. And then you claim that you're creative, and then you start creating. Um, but the difference is like on your side, there is all this technique, but then it also comes with dogma. And then on my side,
Yes.
there is no dogma, but then there is also no technique.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's really about finding that sweet spot in the middle where we have a little bit of technique that's taught to us, but it not enough that it changes our perception or our idea about art. Yeah,
I'm
that's what
smiling. I'm smiling again because this whole conversation is like incredibly timely.
synchronistic.
It really is. It really, really is. This sweet spot is exactly why I say finding the right guide is so important because this is like a shameless plug, but I am the art teacher who walks that line of I will teach you just the skills, the basic, like just the skills that you need in the shortest amount of time to get you where you want to be. And then I want to push you all the way into your artist voice. Like just the skills. So if you're listening at home, that includes drawing, value, and color are the three pillars that are the fastest pillars to, all right, now I can create anything that I want. Drawing, and drawing is comprised of, okay, let me not get too into that. Drawing value is a scale from white to black. So really understanding that scale is a freaking game changer. It's a absolute game changer. And color, they say that value does all the work and color gets all the credit. So we think that color is doing all the work in a painting, but really it's the value scale that's holding that painting together. And when you can think in terms of value first and then color, it really frees up so much in the expression. And then I'm just like, now let's go into your unique voice. What are some images that you love more than anything? So I'm looking behind you and I'm seeing what colors you love, what imagery you love. Like I see butterflies there. I see an Asian like woman with a umbrella. So gathering visuals that you love that really feel accurate to your soul. Again, you're the tea bag in your water. I don't want to be in there. I don't want to be in your water. I just want to tell you what's really working for you and give you some pointers of where to look for visual inspiration, and then give you like a few prompts and then have you just birth the art that you are most freed, like invigorated, liberated by. Um, that's how I see the process of like very little, like definitely skill is super important. I would never say it's not. And but then like your connection to your soul is equally as important. So I call it skill, soul, and sales because ultimately we get to understand how to support ourselves with this offering so that we're not living under a bridge and then you can't paint and you can't buy art materials and etc. You can't feel the dignity of being an artist.
Yeah. Um, oh, I was gonna say so. Okay, you're like the honey in the tea. That's
That's
um,
like however much you need, I'll be there. Yeah, I actually really like that because I have a loving, like a maternal loving softness that's really important. It's like what I needed when I was learning. It's like this softness that's like, you got this, you're amazing. Just like pouring love into that because it's already such a intimate space of a person with their inner child and like creating, it's just like pouring love into that space is really what's needed. And learning how to handle the inner critic where we're not wrestling with the inner critic the whole time. It's like we know how to handle the inner critic where it's actually the inner critic is like flavor rather than like weapons.
mm. Okay, I love that because I wrote down how do we deal with our inner critic, and you brought that up. So that's a perfect place to go. How can we, what are maybe three ways that you feel like, three simple ways that you feel like we can turn our inner critic into flavor when we're trying to create? We're sitting with a blank canvas or we're sitting with whatever we want to create, and the inner critic just won't shut up. What is some advice
All right.
at that moment?
So I like to create an honor to the inner critic because I've wrestled with the inner critic. I've hated the inner critic. I've like that never, it just doesn't work. It's the go-to, it's the easy way, but it doesn't work. So instead, I accept inner critic. You have so much wisdom. You clearly have so much to share and offer, and you clearly have such a high standard for me. So please tell me, what do you see possible for me? And then listen. And I like to have dialogue. I like to have dialogue journal sessions with myself. So um, whether that's me as the inner child and then me as the inner parent, or like I like to set up kind of dialogue spaces in my journal. So it might look like inner critic, and then I ask a question and then it answers. I like question answer type things. So one way to handle the inner critic is just pour honor onto it. It's not going to see it coming. It's going to be like, you honor me, like you hated me, and now you kind of kill it with kindness. And this is just a good way to do any parts work. Like any parts work at all is giving honor to that part rather than trying to suffocate it or starve it. The more we try to starve a part, the louder it gets. So the inner critic actually has a lot of wisdom and really has a high standard for your success. And when you give it that honor, it's like, ooh, where are we going? Now you've got like an edge because you didn't even know that the standard was going to be so good for you, but the inner critic knows that that standard. And so maybe what's going to come through is like you really get to have some skills. And great, now you just okay, what skills do I need? Like maybe your inner critic knows every answer possible, you know? And between your inner critic, who is probably going to have a new name now rather than critic, it's going to be like a guide or something. And you also have access and an ongoing dialogue with your inner child who has that abundant, creative, liberated curiosity. Now you're like unstoppable. Like you didn't even realize how unstoppable you were until you make peace with both of these parts.
That's so beautiful. Allowing the inner critic to actually have a voice because isn't that it? Aren't shadows shadows just because they never get any light? And once
Yeah.
we shine some light on them and once we love on them, we realize that actually they're not shadows, they're just parts of us that never get any light. And
Yeah.
I mean, what do we expect from a part of us that never gets any light? Of course it's going to be
Right.
like, pay attention to me. Of course it's going to like take all of our mind space until we're finally like, okay, you know what do you want? And
Yeah.
the inner critic is like, actually, I want to go to an art class so I can learn better skills. And it's like, oh, that's all you wanted? I should have just listened to
Yeah.
you earlier. So I love that we're
Yeah.
having this conversation because for anyone listening, like if you are going through this with your inner critic, this is great advice that maybe it's just trying to guide you in a way that it knows what's possible for you because the ego often likes to limit us and say, oh, you can't do that. You can't create that well. You want to paint elephants? You can't really paint elephants. Versus the inner critic being like, go learn how to paint elephants. Then you can do whatever the hell you want. Like it is, the world literally is our oyster.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and I also want to say the ego. So I also had a whole dialogue gave light to the inner victim inside me. So the victim was this part that it was having a heyday at the time. This was like a year and a half ago or something, and it was just like it was pulling me into quite a depression. And so I finally gave it the floor. And it was this like, it looked like Gollum from The Lord of the Rings. And it was just like starving. Like it was literally starving. And so then I had a dialogue with the victim and then like my higher self. And she like invited him up to like the penthouse suite. And he had never like spent any time up there. And she had him like gave him food, and like he just finally started like evolving, and he started evolving into like, oh, you wanted a job, oh, what job do you want? So then he like chose a job. So really they just want an elevated role than what they have right now. So even so the reason why I brought that up was you were saying like the ego might say like you're nothing, or you can't paint elephants, but like I would invite you to have a dialogue with that part too, because that part might be like, we can't paint anything, but maybe that just came from childhood when you were like, maybe that part is like 3 years old when you thought you couldn't paint an elephant, and maybe they just don't know the updated script that like actually now there's videos where you can watch to paint an elephant. So by giving it the floor, all of a sudden you open up like, oh, this little pipsqueak of a part like just wasn't getting updated in the same information that your other parts are getting updated. It's not like they're all listening at the same time. Some of them are not hearing where you're going. They haven't been updated on like what your future, how bright it looks, and how it's 2020, almost 25, and you can go on YouTube and find out how to paint elephants. Like it just might not know that.
That's so crazy to think about that, like, there are parts of us that are just not in with the program, and there is nothing wrong with that. Like, we can't expect every single part of us to be completely on all the time because then I don't know how long we'd actually be awake for if, like, all of us has to just be, like, online. Maybe we'd be up for, like, 2 hours and that's it. It's bedtime for 22 hours, you know? It's so crazy to think of. And also, okay, I wanna take this a complete different place just for a really short bit, but I was watching with my husband on YouTube the other day how um what is it? I think it's Samsung. Samsung and Google, whatever. Somebody is coming up with glasses that you put
Mhm.
on and it basically can show you photos in front of you like you're actually there. And so I can imagine it can also show us videos like we're actually there. And so like you're saying, it's 2025. um, I don't think all of our insides know that we're actually capable of holding a phone and then at that point like actually able to project things in front of us
Mhm.
and feel like we're actually in like an art class. Um,
Mhm.
so I feel like at the end of all of this, like it just sounds like we need to give ourselves more compassion and give ourselves more space and give ourselves more time to speak because again, we're consuming so much. Again, another place I want to take this to, which just came back to me. So something that I
Mhm.
feel like, I don't know how you'll feel about this, but I feel like what happens with a lot of couples early in their marriage is when things start to get difficult, it the conversation often becomes let's have a baby, because it's creating something, because otherwise it's a lot of consuming together, right? You go out to eat together, you go out to drink together, you watch a movie together, um you read messages from each other, you like it's a lot of consuming, but it's so rare that we actually find couples creating together.
Mhm. Yeah, I love creating with my partners. My current partner, like I love being in spaces with him where we are creating together. So he's not a painter, but what I did do, so he got out of the Navy when we met. Well, he was in the Navy when we met, and through the way that I am and the way that I stand for my inner child so much, he started realizing that he's been on a path of like never asking himself what he actually wants. And so through him asking that over a repeated amount of time, now he's actually doing what he wants and he's so joyful about it. So now I call him an artist, even though he's not like a painter artist, but he is following his heart. He's aligning with radically with his truth. So I do call him an artist, and he knows that. And because of us meeting in that place of us both creating our life in real time based on how we want our lives to look, we find ourselves giving a lot of like talks or podcast. Like we've got a podcast together, just creating things. Like just today, we created a new talk called Seducing Each Other into Greatness. So it's like there's so much creativity to be had when both partners are seducing one another into greatness. Um, the baby conversation is a conversation that we're having as well, just based on my age. He already has 2 kids. So we're having that conversation because I do want to have a baby. Um, but I would not by any stretch say that we're having a baby because we're bored or anything like that. We're very not bored. And only having a baby just based on like biological timing and wanting, like me wanting to have that relationship with a child that he already has with his children. But that's my long answer of saying there's so many ways to create with your partner when you're both alive and turned on by life and like in creation mode. Whereas I think a lot of people, they say that their partner is not necessarily in that mode. And that's maybe when they turn to a baby as like the answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly that. So definitely nothing wrong with wanting a baby, nothing wrong with having a baby. Babies are freaking beautiful. I'm so excited to have a baby someday. However, see, like just what you were saying, the difference in tone of a couple that is already creating together and then looking to have a baby versus a couple that's maybe going through a rough patch and thinking, okay, the
Mm-hmm.
baby's gonna fix it. But
Yeah.
actually, what ends up happening is there ends up being a lot more friction because rather than working on what's already there, you're bringing another life into the picture, but you're not
Yeah.
even sure how to handle the two lives that are there. So then
Right.
what? I just
Mm,
feel like it's such a dilemma in this culture where we're consuming so much and then we
mm-hmm.
don't really know how to create. So I think it's so beautiful that we have more conscious relationships coming up,
Yeah.
more of us that are honoring each other and what we need, partners like our partners that may not have been so creative, but then they're engaging us in our creativity and they're also trying to, play and flirt with their own creativity. I think there is
Yeah.
so much joy and magic and potential there because then, I
Yeah.
mean, that changes everything, right? You said we're a mycelium
Yeah.
network, and if the mycelium network is not like online with the person we're closest to or in touch most with, then how does that mycelium network even stretch out further?
Right. Exactly. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so something else I want to ask you about because you brought up the word dignified a lot. What does it mean to you, dignified, and to have
Yeah.
dignified art?
Dignity feels like royalty. So I'm sure you were in the most recent class of Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine. Um, it feels important to recognize that there's royalty in our blood. Like it feels important as artists. We were talking earlier about how does an artist value their value. Having a perception shift of like, I'm just a pedestrian little nincompoop that doesn't know anything. Like, that's just a perception of self. We can also shift that perception of self to there's royalty in my blood. I stand for something. I stand for the people. Like I stand, like even imagining myself as a queen, like I stand for my people. I stand for the people. I stand for bringing um resources to the people. I stand for artists, for creatives. So I'm using the word stand for because it's like it turns you into a leadership position versus maybe a follower or a consumer. I think it's really important for our perception of self to go from I'm a taker to I'm a giver. And in that shift from taker to giver, in that perception shift, I start to show up differently and I experience dignity in myself. I create a course that feels dignified. It feels like, how do so I want to define this instead of just using the word. Well, maybe it goes back to like being a Leo and being like the king of the jungle energy, but I don't just want to say that Leos have access to that. I want like Leos show everyone what's possible in that. That's what our role is to show what it looks like and feels like to shine our true light to the world from the child, from that inner child. So dignified means I value what I am. It's like not even who I am. It's like I value what I am. I value my purpose in this cosmos. I value myself as a child of God. I value myself as God. Like I say some kind of radical things sometimes that I forget that some people like have a hard time with that. But I was Orthodox Jewish for a while, and I feel like I can stand in the fact that we are made in God's image, and that means I am God. Like, I don't mean that I am God, like all bow down to me. I mean, it's the great equalizer that we are all God. I am God, and so are you. I believe that that's what Jesus was saying. Um, Whether that's what the church agrees on or not, that doesn't matter to me. I believe that we're all God, that we're all spirit, source, divine. So now that I recognize myself as divine and I know that about myself, it's not just like I believe I am, but like I know I am. I live like that. Now my creations are dignified. Like they're not just um nonchalant. Like they're like um crucial. Like there's an incredibleness about it that this is also kind of the Eastern tradition of like yoga philosophy, which is like I am Shakti and Shiva creating itself and witnessing itself. So I like to go into a lot of different spiritual methodologies or mythologies and find the truth that feels true for me, which is that I am a dignified expression of divine source energy. And I believe that when we tap into that, our creations are valuable and they're not just accidental, like they're aligned and and like serendipitous, or it's not even serendipitous, like they're like it's like synchronized creative oneness. I don't even know how to, this is where I'm going with this question because I've never been asked that. So I really appreciate that opportunity to like discover that. Like my words, like every word that comes out of my mouth is intentional. It's like
Yeah.
there's an intentionality about it.
Mm. You know, what's interesting is I feel like when we are intentional about it and when we are creating dignified art or art that just feels really true and really deeply, yeah, just deeply true to us, what's really cool is I find that we start seeing the same type of art around us. Like when
Mm,
we just listen to, for example, I saw it in like words. Like when I would be sharing, this is back in the day when I was reading the Akashic records and I would be sharing like visions of what I saw. And I would see more people talking about exactly the same thing. That's what would make me be like, that is so damn cool that we are tapping into the same source and we are saying the same thing. And it's not because we're copying each other, but it's because we're both so tapped into our own
yeah.
um, dignity, as you say.
Yeah. 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 And I like to have dignity in the space that I live. So I have another workshop called Dignity in the Bedroom. And dignity in the bedroom looks like, how do you want to wake up in the morning? Like, what do you want to be looking at? And like, do you want to feel like you're in a room like designed for a princess or a queen? Like, what does that look like for you? So I spend a lot of very intentional energy on creating the bedroom that feels dignified. It feels like this is how I want to wake up and this is how I want to go to sleep. And we spend a lot of time in there, you know? And this is how I want my wardrobe to look. And I only want clothing that feels dignified. And it just feels like I'm creating this wonderland around myself that is intentional and wonderful. And that's art, it's artful also.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, I think this is a great place to round it up because we've gone pretty deep. We've come back to surface, but I do want to ask you a few last questions. The first one being, what does it feel like to live in your own living gallery?
It feels like a tea bag steeped in it feels like it feels very grounded. Feels very grounded. It feels very peaceful to witness my whole journey. Like there's so many years of paintings. There's there's so many aspects of my journey that's illuminated. It's like an illustration. I'm living in a like illustrated book of my journey. Yeah, it feels like a tea bag that's just like really allowed to steep in the fullness of what my journey has been. And it's deep reminders. And each of these paintings were a prayer at that time. And um, so they just keep on giving. Like it also allows for the value to remain because I have a painting over here that's $50,000. And if that sells, that will be great. And if it doesn't, that's also great because I've got a $50,000 painting on my wall. And I love it so much. It like literally feels like that it is that valuable to me. And so I just feel very abundant. I feel like I'm living, whether they sell now or later, like I feel very full of value surrounding me. And it's my own life. It's the value of our own life that I think is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so cool to be like you said, in a storybook of you. You created all of it. You illustrated all of it. You felt all of it to create all of it. And to have that kind of depth around you can only inspire you to create even more, right? I feel like once we see what we've created, we're like, wow, I can do that. I can do more of that, like especially on days that maybe when you're feeling crappy and you see all of this stuff that you've created, you're like, wait, but how can I feel crappy if I can actually make that and I can even make more of that and get myself out of feeling crappy?
Totally. It's the alchemy of every single feeling that I have. I know how to alchemize it. I know how to turn it into something beautiful. And that's the other thing about abundance is every feeling that I have is fuel for the machine or whatever, like the painting machine. Like I can just keep feeding it with new feelings and new emotions and new understandings about life, and it just keeps on giving. It's so abundant. It doesn't ever stop. Like until I will never retire. I'm never going to retire because I'm always going to have new things to process. And this is very similar to how Frida Kahlo lived. Like she had a miscarriage. That's a whole painting series. She's cheated on. That's a whole painting series. Like self-portraits and meeting herself in these new moments and everything that happened to her. Like that's why I love Frida Kahlo, not because I don't love her paintings per se, but I love that she painted them because everything she painted was such an honest reflection of what she was going through at that time. And I can feel the dignity of how she perceived her life. She wasn't just like, oh, this life is just a bunch of nonsense. It was hard, but she turned it into gold, like over and over. She alchemized lead to gold over and over. And I'm so inspired by that process. That's why I'm an artist who's never going to be I'm never going to be the kind of artist who has so many commissions that I can't paint the actual art of my heart.
Mm. Yeah. Ooh, that's so powerful. And as you're talking about freedom, thinking about the documentary that I watched, how there was never really like a gallery opening or like her having a gallery around her until like the very end when they brought her in on the hospital stretcher and she was looking around, but as she was looking around she had her hand on her head because she was like very close to that death. And how sad is it that she only got to experience that at the end of her life, and how beautiful is it that you are doing that right now, like claiming your life, reclaiming your life, and just like living in your own story. I think that's incredibly powerful. So
Yeah,
thank you for living your story. Thank you for sharing your
yeah.
story. I have a question which you actually answered throughout the whole podcast, but what would you say makes you a artist?
Hmm. Great question. What makes me a artist? My devotion to my inner child. My devotion to my own essence is what makes me a artist. Because in my reclamation of myself, I'm able to love others so profoundly.
Said like a true Leo. I love that. It's so it speaks to my soul. Okay, and lastly, where can people find you? How can they work with you and to what capacity?
All right, so this I feel like this is such a great lead in because I have an upcoming retreat called Frida Be Me, Frida Be Me, like free to be me. But it's spelled like Frida Kahlo because she really inspired me when I went to visit her in Mexico City. After my solo trip, I went to visit her in Mexico City. And I was like, I'm turning my home into an art museum. And I am doing this retreat as a nod to how she lived her life and how I'm living my life. Like how you said, I am cultivating a very intentional life of valuing my value. Um, and I want that for others. Like even as you're talking, I'm like, you would be the perfect person to come to this retreat, like literally perfect. So people like Karina, like you're probably the perfect person because I'm in the mornings, I'm going to be teaching skill, just drawing value and color. And in the evenings, I'm going to be, not evenings, but afternoons, I'm going to be guiding your own unique inner voice. And we're going to have 4 calls leading up to it to support you with your inner child, your inner critic, alchemy, like how to turn your feelings into art. And the 4th one, I don't remember right now. Maybe I think the 4th one is about the process of becoming pregnant with your art. Like that gestation period of getting inspiration and turning it into your birth, like the birth so the birth is going to be the retreat. So in the afternoons, we're going to be birthing everything we've been gestating. And then 4 calls at the end that are going to be an integration of how to keep doing this in your life so that you can have the life of the intentional artist that you are and value your life and be. So many people have a hard time with like calling themselves an artist, or a artist, like to be it, to live it in your life, to turn that faucet on and just never have it go off. So that's one thing is the retreat. Obviously, Instagram, my name is Nadja Marks Shafton.art on there. And I've got many retreats coming up this year, one in France, I think one in Bali, and the one coming up is in Sarasota, Florida, in my house, in my gallery. And then I'm just gonna have I have a lot of really interesting things coming up this year. I feel like this is a really big year to share myself and share what I've been cultivating. It feels like a really big year. So I'm grateful for this podcast right now because it feels like in a way we just talked about everything that I'm about to just like shine out there.
Yeah, and it's perfect timing now that you have your living gallery. I love that you opened it on 11/11, like just that number one magic of like just stepping in and being so open to what's about to come. And this podcast will be out in January. So this is like yeah, this is your year ahead. So I'm glad that I got to be part of your year ahead, and
Yeah.
I'm excited to see everything that you create and the retreats that you create. And when you're closer to me in Bali, maybe I'll come see you because that would be so cool.
Yeah, it's because
The
you live in
Philippines,
Philippines, and that's close to Bali.
that's close to Bali. It's about a 3 or 4 hour flight.
Yeah, that's gonna be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, like, to all the artists out there, like, I have a huge heart for you. Like, I really want to see you thrive. I don't want to be the only person thriving. I want to thrive for all of us. I stand for all of us to thrive. I believe that every single one of us, there's a reason why we're an artist. There's a value. I'm really grateful to say this right now because there's a value to art that we've never seen before, ever, ever. In art history, we've always been an artist to the court, to the church, to a wealthy family. We've always been somewhat in the prostitute art archetype of like, pay me and I'll do the art. Like, it's always been an exchange and a transaction like that until the Impressionists, a little bit of the Naturalists before the Impressionists. But, and I don't want to say everyone, but like en masse, it's been a prostitute type of archetype, and that's where the scarcities come in. So now that we are coming into this new age, the new earth, the art that wants to come through us is dignified, it is source and divine, and we get to value that because this is the time that this world needs exactly the art that is coming through each and every single one of us. And genuinely, we've never had that kind of expression on this planet before. And so if there's ever a time to value being an artist, it's now. And I'm standing for you. Like, I'm standing for every single one of you. I feel that I was put on this planet at this time for this reason. And Chelsea Diane's another person like that. Like, she's standing for the creatives, for the poets, for the writers, for the artists. And I really resonate with that. And it's that position from going from being a taker to a giver. Like, I am ready to really be a giver at a very big level and invite other people into that as well. And that's what being an artist is being a giver. Like, you're just giving your soul, giving your authenticity, giving love, giving your divinity. And if we're not doing that as an artist, we're like dying. So it's really a great time to step into that now. Yeah.
I also feel like if we're not doing that as a human, we're also dying because
Yes.
if we keep consuming, there is only one thing that can happen is we can implode. But
Yes.
once there is a balance, it's so different because then we're kind of leaving pieces of ourselves on planet Earth. And when we're no
Yes.
longer on planet Earth, there will still be pieces of us on planet Earth. And how magical is that? Like we get this 100-year time span maybe to create whatever we want and keep on giving and keep on giving and keep on giving because after these 100 years, even if we come back and give, it's a whole different frequency, it's a whole different flavor, it's a whole different person. So when
Mm.
we look at it that way, like it's so cool that we get the
Mhm.
opportunity to create relics of ourselves right now and
Mhm.
leave it for the world to have even when we're not here. That's magic.
Yeah, because you're saying relics of ourself, but when you understand yourself as divine, it's like you're leaving relics of divinity in this place. And
Mm.
that's what this world wants and needs. And you like that's the story of the light winning over the darkness. Like we're just channeling, we're like pillars channeling in divine energy into this world and being unapologetic about it.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes to all of this. Thank you so much for this conversation, Nadia. It's been such an
Thank
honor
you.
having you on the podcast.
I loved it. Thank you so much for reaching out and for yeah, for initiating this. And you're an amazing host. You're an amazing interviewer host. So keep going and yeah, keep inspiring. Keep keep creating a beautiful platform for artists.
Thank you.